world rules. It's it's been it's hard to believe that it's been less than a year since brain rules versus world rules construct was launched into the world. It feels like we've been talking about this forever.
So I want to talk about brain rules versus world rules. Brain rules are things that we think are universal life truths, but are actually things that we made up, or someone else made up and told us, and we adopted them. World rules are things that are actual life truths. So a lot of times when we flip our lids, it relates to the violation of a brain rule, which we think is a world rule. So today at 4 o'clock Eastern, I'm going to be talking about brain rules versus world rules. What are they? Why are they? How do you tell the difference? And what do you do about them, if anything?
So you heard me define in what it sounds like was our first Instagram reel, um, um, what we originally meant by these terms. And, sometimes it's really hard to distinguish a brain rule from a world rule. If it were easy, we wouldn't be talking about this. So, I think the ability to zoom out, take a look at our own thoughts about, the assumptions, with the things we grew up with, the things that society brainwashes us to believe, and really be able to distinguish, is this truly like an objective universal life truth, like analogous to a law of physics, or is it a brain rule? This has huge implications in all kinds of relationships. So, examples: brain rule. If I say no, people will be mad at me. I have to look at the camera during Zoom meetings. I'm pretty sure that's like the first one I've looked at the camera in like 6 months. We have to sit down together as a family at the dinner table because that's what good families do. Brain rule. I should be able to do anything. Versus truly, I have value as a human being. I have autonomy to provide consent to what I want, to set boundaries for what I don't want. There's no right way to think, learn, or communicate. Or the dopamine bound brain needs dopamine. That's a world rule. Why do we make brain rules? We've talked a ton at Brain Club about regulation and dysregulation and what leads to both, and the physical, the emotional, the cognitive, the social factors that contribute to regulation or dysregulation. I believe that brain rules are cognitive self-regulation. They are the things we tell ourselves to establish autonomy or control, to make the world predictable or make sense, reduce overload in a chaotic world, to avoid trauma, whether that be traumatic memories or incurring new trauma. So, for example, I tell Luna, like, in this house, we don't drink cranberry juice in the living room because it has a light carpet. Yeah, that's a brain rule. I made it up. I did it for a reason. It served a purpose. It's because I don't want to deal with the chaos of having to clean and the executive functioning burden of having to clean up cranberry juice on the light carpet. Doesn't make it a world rule. So now what? Let's say I identified my brain rules. What do? I do not need to get rid of them. So, like, first up, is it a brain rule or world rule? It doesn't need to be rational. Remember, it's self-regulation. It comes from downstairs brain. Downstairs brain is not upstairs brain. We don't expect or require rationality from downstairs brain. it is supposed to keep you alive. It's not about whether it's rational. So, like in traditional mental health therapy approaches that set up these objective truths of the neutral, balanced thought, that's not what this is about. This is, does this brain rule serve me? Does this help me? But still, you probably formed that brain rule for a reason. It just, that reason may have run its course. But if it's still helping you, still serving you, go ahead and keep it. If not, you can consider letting go of that brain rule, making a new brain rule. Anyway, so like Luna will say, Mama, I need to eat chocolate before breakfast. And I'm like, brain rule or world rule? She says, brain rule. But it's my brain rule and I'm keeping it. Okay, all right, sweet love. As long as you know that it's not a law of physics. That's all I ask. So once we introduce that original concept, it's time to unlearn some things.
Hey, Mel here. Things are getting real at Brain Club tomorrow because I'm going to be talking about shame. Shame, that painful core belief of being broken. It starts when we're sweet little loves, when the world tells us in subtle yet profound ways that the way we fundamentally are is broken because we should be able to do stuff in particular ways, even though 1 in 5 people thinks, learns, or communicates differently than the so-called normal brain. Brain rules, all of it, not a world rule.
So first a discussion of shame, and that led to next imposter syndrome.
Syndrome, to describe that feeling where you just feel like not good enough, not smart enough, they're gonna find out, I don't belong here, I'm a phony, they're gonna know. What's the line between that and ableism? Internalized ableism. Because of the cultural brain rule that there's one right way to be in the world.
And next we applied this to gender, the brain rules of the gender binary.
So, my sweet little love and I, we have been discussing this incredible book, Neither, by Early Anderson.
I am in the land of all.
Mm-hmm. And who belongs in the land of all?
Everyone.
Yeah. And why do you think the people who are in the land of this and that, why do you think they think that you have to be this or that? Brain rule or world rule?
It's a brain rule.
So from there, we went off in a couple different directions, trying on new things in Brain Club, talking about the big picture of neurodiversity and inclusion. But ultimately, we circled back around to brain rules and world rules, unlearning and reimagining better life in healthcare, education, employment, parenting, relationships. Let's watch. In healthcare, given that 80% of autistic adults have difficulty accessing medical care, and so much of that relates to the deficit-based, stigmatized autism narrative that the healthcare system perpetuates. Here at All Brains Belong, we've really made it a core part of our work to try to shift that stigmatized narrative. In the spring, we did a free training for healthcare providers. It was actually delivered in somewhat of an oblique approach about this is how to deliver neuro-inclusive healthcare. But the real deal is that in 2022, things like this are coming out from autism experts in the traditional system. This quote We created an infographic out of a report from one of our patients, shared with permission from family, that this autistic child does not come across as, quote, clinically having the separate inwardly focused quality pathognomonic of the disorder. He interacts significantly and seamlessly with parents and demonstrates empathy. Rapport is present. Ergo, he's not autistic. Rose. So the thing is, unfortunately, in medical education, you're really only training stereotypes. I know that was my experience as a physician trained in the usual way. This study in 2015 showing that less than 10% of primary care physicians would suspect autism if their patient volunteered information, showed interest in people, discussed emotions, and can see the whole picture. So with that, this was a clip from our brain club on the brain rules of the healthcare system.
We used to have one nurse for every 3 patients, and over the course of time that I worked there, we shifted to one nurse for every 6 patients. So it went up steadily over time. I never felt so burnt out, and I loved the job that I was actually doing. I didn't have time to do it well. And it wasn't a matter of not caring. I just didn't have the tools to do that job in the way that I knew it had to be done. I was doing oncology and end of life care. So these were people who really needed a lot of support. And I'd be running in to give them exactly, practically, physically what they needed and get out. I was not able to provide that emotional support. I was feeling really unfulfilled in my work. So when we think about like these things that are happening, I would hate to look at it as just that these are really crappy providers that aren't doing a good job. I can tell you, I think I was a good nurse. I like to think I'm a good person, and I was doing a crappy job. And I know better, I'd like to see it better, but we don't often have the tools to make change in that moment ourselves either.
I'm so sorry that you had that experience, and so many people have. And I think that they're like one of the brain rules that I am learning is that like brain rule is like, well, the system has to be this way, right? Because that's how it is. Like that's what healthcare is. Like how it is here. Well, you need a lot of money. No, you don't. Like, I mean, you just don't. I would say like I prefer not to think about it as like, you know, bucking up against the system. I see it more as like parallel play of like, yeah, in order to be able to practice in a less restrictive environment and meet the needs of my community. This was about like, okay, let's ask about people. Ask the people what they need, and balance that with what I need and what Sierra needs. Like, that's it. And I think almost like I remember in training, like I saw that it was like hard and that like experiences like you were describing, Laura, were happening. And it's like, oh well, it's a foregone conclusion that like this is what it's like to work in healthcare.
I think a large part of the problem I've run into is that for a doctor to understand you, you need to be able to tell them your story. And if you can't do that in 15 minutes. So I've gone kind of an alternative route where I will write stuff up like I did with you and send in a long document. Some doctors will read it and a lot of them will never see it before you get there. Then it doesn't work in the appointment because they're looking at this thing and say, do I need to read this first? So that falls apart. What I really was amazed about was when I was looking for somebody up here, then it's All Brains Belong. I was like reading the website, saying, oh, this sounds pretty good. And then when I started filling out the forms, I was like, wow, this is exactly the kind of thing I'm looking for. And then I sent you my mind maps and my emails, and I think other doctors would have been just overwhelmed, but instead you were like, oh, this is so cool. This is so helpful. And I've never run into that before. So I think that inclusivity of being able to communicate in the way that, you can, some people are probably better in person. For me, it was definitely, I need time to really think it through, especially since I've had a long history of it. So your organization has broken so many of the brain rules that I've seen in healthcare,
And next, we took on the brain rules of the education system. We had a panel of experienced educators talking through their experiences and the reimagining of what's possible.
Our society is made up of systems. Systems are such an important and natural way of life. I look at nature as the system, and I try to mimic our day-to-day rhythms based on nature. That said, not all humans fit into the same systems, and that includes education. My years of working in schools, I fully believe that all educators do the best that they can and love what they do, and that's why they do it. But that said, every place isn't for everyone. And being able to have options for students that don't fit into a certain box is such an important way of mimicking nature. Nature gives us choices, and I think education should give us choices too. And if we can provide different opportunities for our kids, they're going to be able to blossom in ways that we've never seen.
We also took on the brain rules of employment. With and this, if you missed this one, this was a really great panel conversation.
I think that one of the ways that I feel proud of my company is like we're a whole person-centered business. So we try to like take into account the whole person and what they're experiencing. I remember
and Kes, what you said about like the whole person showing up in work and what that means for workplaces these days feels really important for us to be talking about. So for those of you that haven't heard about United Way's Working Bridges initiative, we are a partnership with employers. So we work with employers to look at innovative solutions to retention. And one of those key ways we've been able to help employers and employees with keeping good jobs is having resource coordinators in workplaces to help employees who are facing different things in their life. They bring their whole selves to work, and they might need support with housing or transportation or childcare or money worries or other strains in their life. And so my work actually kind of weaved its way to Dr. Hauser's work with Mel's work. And there's a lot of really interesting intersection with thinking about the needs that come up for our team of resource coordinators in workplaces. And one of the things we've discovered that often employees will come and talk to us about something that's happening in their lives. And as we get to know that person and build some relationship with that employee, and we peel back that onion and they feel trust in sharing what's going on, we learn a lot about what they need in work to really be their best self. And sometimes they get that, and sometimes they don't.
And next to relationships, looking at the brain rules of relationships that no longer serve me. I'm obligated to talk to, insert fill in the blank. The more I communicate with an unsafe person, the greater likelihood they'll understand me. I can make others listen to me. I can make people understand me. I am not safe until someone listens to me. The only way to get unstuck is to make someone else change. Whoa. And parenting brain rules no longer serve me. Screen time, oh my goodness. Child needs to sleep alone. Your child will participate and like what they're enrolled in. Child needs to share. Eyes are for watching, ears are for listening, hands are still, oh my goodness. Everyone has to sit down at the table. People to say please. Oh my goodness, so many brain rules. All right, so then what did we do? We said, all right, well, we know we can't challenge brain rules. Let's take the oblique approach. Let's talk about how do we have these big conversations with people who aren't quite on board yet? How do we create neuro-inclusive spaces? How do we talk about culture, neuroculture? How do we address this without challenging people's brain rules? Because if we've learned anything in our first year at All Brains Belong, as we reimagine all the systems that are not working for the neurodivergent community, we don't challenge brain rules. That's why we talk about inclusion here. Everybody wants inclusion. They may just have no idea what it means. The world rule is that if you challenge people's brain rules,